You guys can't hear me. I just realized that the mute button was on. What a great way to start your Saturday night. This is my first Saturday night show, everybody. Josh Turner will be joining me shortly. He's driving in from Austin, Texas. It's going to be a fantastic show. So thank you for coming in. Thank you so much for coming on in. If this is your first time here, please give a thumbs up, like, subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube. Hit the alert bell. Also subscribe to Texas Front Porch on YouTube, the Blondes, the Booze Paranormal Podcast on YouTube. And, of course, I see a lot of paratroopers in here, but of course, subscribe to Josh Turner, Paranormal Roundtable, who's taking out his time tonight to spend it with y'all. I do appreciate that, Josh, when I pull him up here in a minute. If you like our content, like what we do around here, the super chat's open. Great. It's a great way to support what we do around here. You can find us on iHeartRadio, KPNL Radio, Spreaker, and whatever podcasts are found. For those of you that are new that are coming on in, the show is more than an hour long, but right around the 52-minute mark, we do got to take a 5-minute break, and we come right back because we have to take care of some sponsors, some advertising, our podcasting, KPNL Radio, and Selene out in Texas. So, they format it down to an hour, so I got to give that 5 minutes for them to take care of that. Don't know why that is. I'm not a video editor, so I don't know, but that's what we do around here. And I'm going to give you our schedule throughout the week. Mondays is Texas Front Porch. Subscribe to him. 7 Central, 8 in the East on Mondays. Tuesdays, right here, beyond BMR, 9 o'clock in the East, 8 Central. Wednesdays on Texas Front Porch is the Diva Dimension. Diva Dimension, 9 Central, 10 in the East. Thursdays, brunch with Bigfoot Michigan Rob. I'm on with Tex, 1 o'clock p.m. Thursday afternoons. Thursday night, the Blondes, the Booze, the Paranormal Podcast, they come on at 9 Central in the East on Thursdays. And if you need a little more woo mixed in, the Blondes and Booze also come back on Fridays, 9 Central. And, if you're into true crime, Tex and Danielle Diva got this new show that they've put out on Saturdays at 3 in the East. It's called Infamous Minds. It's about true crime. So Tex and Miss Diva are dabbling in some true crime. Hi, Hawk. Thanks for becoming a member. Thank you for that. And so you guys check out Tex on Saturdays at 3. If you're into true crime, it's the place to be if you got nothing going on Saturday evening. And again, I've got a guy that's always busy. Just popped up backstage. I saw him driving in to Austin from wherever he was. So I'm not going to mince words, or I'm going to get right into it. I'm bringing up my guest, Josh Turner from Paranormal Roundtable.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey Josh, how are you, man? Thanks for coming on in.
I'm good.
I really appreciate this. I'm just going to get all this out of the way. I do shows Tuesday nights, Thursday afternoons, and I've been trying to get you on for a while. And you got things going on, so our schedules conflicted with these. And so I personally want to thank you for making time for Saturday evening to come on. I typically don't do Saturday shows. I don't know that you do. So I do really appreciate it. And I thank you for that.
Yeah, we're friends. I don't do a lot of other people's shows. I've said that before. I actually turned down some pretty large engagements. I don't have time. That's why I do friends shows, and you're a friend, so.
Yeah, well, we are friends. I do appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. But I always got, I got to give credit where credit's due, and I do appreciate that. So thanks. So typically, this is the part of the show because I typically on Tuesdays, I got Krista is my co-host, and then on Thursdays, Tex is my co-host. So I'm flying solo, which is fine because I've done many solo shows. So you got to play the role of Tex because I always start the show off with a little BS. And I got to tell you, Josh, I was watching my Michigan Wolverines play Maryland. I will tell you this. If they don't get it together, we will not beat Ohio State later on next week, man.
That's going to be a big one, and that's always a tough game for you guys. I can tell you, I hate to tell you this, but I think I got Ohio State on that one. That's just
well, and I know a lot of the people in chat aren't really big sports fans. We won't dabble too much, but they don't have Harbaugh there suspended for that cheating incident or advanced scouting. The players have to be a little bit let down. And I think after a while, when their leader is gone, although he practices with them throughout the week, that's got to be a letdown. And I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State did pull it off.
Yeah, I honestly am kind of looking for that to happen. My Longhorns are on the outside looking in. We need help, and if we can get in, the next week or two, we could probably get in. But I don't. It's going to be hard. That one loss to Oklahoma, which was so heartbreaking. But there was a lot of no calls. I mean, there's a picture of our running back getting his head pulled off with the face mask at the goal line, and they're like, "Oh, you got stopped over and over again." Well, yeah, when you're tearing someone's head off by their face mask, but that's what we've come to expect that from Texas. Me being a
Yeah,
conspiracy theorist, I believe there's something behind it. I think that they don't like Michigan either. There's certain reasons why. We've talked about this with the Lions. I feel
we've
like the
talked
Lions,
about the Lions 91. Well, that was our last playoff win. And
which
then
was
playing
against
again
my Cowboys, yeah.
your
Eric
Cowboys, and
Kramer.
we played your Cowboys again.
Yeah, and got rooked. I understand that, but that was just
Yeah.
to set it up for the Cowboys Packers, and then the Cowboys were in order to get rooked, and that was the Des Bryant catch because they wanted the Packers in there in the Super Bowl. The Packers are the NFL's welfare team. They really are. They don't have a market because they have a town the size of like a suburb of Austin, like Round Rock is the size of Green Bay, which it doesn't make sense to have that team there in that town. But it was a traditional, long-standing, team, or a football town. So that's why they're there. But in order to sustain them, they had to do what they call collective bargaining, and that meant that all the NFL teams, no matter how much money they made, had to support them, which
Yep.
is basically like they all just kind of pulled their money together, and said, "Okay, we're going to give you welfare so you can have a team there," which doesn't make any sense.
No, it
Um,
doesn't.
it's not fair. It's not correct. I mean, it's not fair to teams like that have been, the really popular teams. There's like 6 of them in particular that carry the NFL, and that's the Cowboys, the Niners, the
Yeah.
Raiders, the Dolphins, the Steelers. Those are the teams that like literally, and the Broncos are another one that's pretty big. They round out. There's like 10 in the top 10, and they
Yeah.
all kind of support the rest of the league. I mean,
Yep.
and
And,
because of that, I mean, it's not fair.
and they were the original championship teams for many of who you mentioned, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what it goes back to. And that's really that's where television sponsors, as everybody, the NFL ownership, well, maybe not the owners as much, but the NFL brass, that's where they want. But now, hopefully, these Lions, I mean, hopefully they'll turn that tide, because I got to tell you, we're playoff bound, and I'm
They
not
look
going to
pretty
count.
good.
They look good, and let's just hope that they win a playoff game. If we get home field advantage,
I would say if the league doesn't cheat with the
yeah,
flags and the no calls, I would say Dallas and Detroit are probably the 2 real contenders. I didn't think that the Eagles were impressive at all, and I thought that game was kind of handed to them. And I think the 3 straight losses from the Niners, yeah, they came off of a big win over Dallas, who I knew they were going to lose that game. They just weren't ready, and the refs weren't going to. When you destroy 3 drives, that's going to happen, and so they were given that game too. I don't care what anybody says. A lot of people don't like the Cowboys, but they don't care about people. The people don't care about their teams getting screwed until it happens to their team. Nobody cares if the Browns or whoever, the Texans, whoever gets screwed week in and week out until it happens to them, and then they're up in arms. So all these Eagle fans are like, oh yeah, we're glad the Cowboys lost. We don't care if they don't care how it happens or whatever, but they're happy about it until it happens to them. Then they're all crying and screaming and freaking out. But your team's been on the losing and the recipient of some really bad stuff for a long time. I actually watched a YouTube video, and it was all about the Lions over and over again getting screwed and just not getting the calls and the no calls and whatever. And the Browns are another one. There's them and the Bengals are smaller market teams, and they're not real popular, and they get their hopes crushed pretty regularly. The Patriots for 2 decades they've held sway, And then the Rams came in and they went to LA, and I told everybody, I said, watch, they're going to force their will and make the Rams go to the Super Bowl. And they did. But then they lost to the Pats. But then they got them back in there and they managed to beat the Bengals. There was no way in hell that the Bengals were going to win that game. If you were a betting man, I would have ran straight to the bookies and given them everything I had that the Bengals were going to lose, because the league, I guarantee you, Goodell was like, this team is going. This is who needs to win, the Rams, because we need that large market. You need the East Coast, the New York market, which New England filled the void for that for 20 years, and then you had the LA. Now you notice something odd. The Patriots, they beat up on everybody. They won all these Super Bowls, 6 Super Bowls in this span with Belichick and Brady. But what was the team that beat them twice in the Super Bowl? Both times a yucky wild card team. The Giants. Right. Yeah, the Giants did it twice. Yeah.
The infamous helmet catch.
Oh, yeah, and then when you look at that Patriots Super Bowl where the Patriots were undefeated all year, they were undefeated. They were 16-0, and then they won in the divisional playoffs, AFC Championship. They were on the way. It was going to be the perfect season since the Dolphins, but that's not really fair because the Dolphins only played 14 games back in 1973, whatever it was. What or 71, whatever year it was. But it's crazy. I knew that the Giants were going to win that game. I knew it. And it was and of course the refs, they always play way too much of a role in who wins and who loses.
Yes, they do.
And I knew that was going to happen. And I'm not a real heavy betting guy, but I bet on the Giants and I won big, because I knew that they were going to win. And everybody was like, well, they just kind of stumbled in there. No, they beat the Cowboys. I didn't think they were going to make it out of Tampa Bay that year, but they beat the Bucs. They beat the Cowboys, and then they went on to beat the Packers. That was in 2007 when they upset the Patriots. But then I think it was 3 years later, I think it was, when they beat the Patriots. And both times I betted on them to win because it was New York. And conventional thinking, you don't bet against New York or LA ever, because those are the large media markets. Chicago being the third market. Well, let's be honest, the Bears, they haven't had a quarterback in forever since Jim McMahon.
And Jim McMahon wasn't even very good because
he wasn't even that good.
Nah, he had that great defense that's going to go down in history as probably one of the best.
Yeah, he was a caretaker. That's what he was.
Yeah, he was all Hollywood with his sunglasses and this and that, but
that's how Dilfer was with the Ravens when they won.
I think that's even more of a tragedy. Well, the Ravens had a badass defense too.
Yeah, they had Saragusa, and Ray Lewis, but that Buccaneers were the same way in 2002. Brad Johnson, he couldn't win nothing after he left Tampa Bay. He was a caretaker. All he had to do was just not turn the ball over. They had an offensive genius in Gruden as a coach, and then that defense was just cold-blooded. I mean, you had John Lynch. You had what's his name, McFarland, and you had Derek Brooks at linebacker. He was the Mike linebacker, and you had Warren Sapp. That was a killer defense. That defense was cold-blooded, man. Shelton Quarles, and what's his name, Rondé Barber, right?
Mm-hmm.
That squad was just unlimited right there. That was a crazy good. And history repeated itself. When they went to the frozen tundra, I had a friendly bet with Ken Gerhardt, and he's a big Packer fan. Unfortunately, we had to pray for him. But I told him, I said, dude, you're going to lose, man. He goes, no way these Buccaneers are going to beat my Packers. I said, oh, man, they're going to beat you, and they're going to beat you soundly. And then the next week, they're going to beat Kansas City. And so that was another one I won big on, too, because all the way through, I knew they were going to win.
Yeah, and before we get too deep into the sports too, because we could probably talk about this for 2 hours. The Atlanta Falcons up on the Patriots big. If
collapsed.
You were betting, and if you would have, I guess you can go ahead and bet fourth quarter. Oh yeah, you could put all your money. And I tell you what, I don't know if that game was a setup or not, but for them to come back, down
I didn't touch that one, Rob. I didn't touch it.
I don't know, but anyways, we could talk about it ad nauseum about sports. I should start a sports channel. That's what we should do next, Josh. Get a sports channel together.
I know a lot about it. I can tell you about the Bill Buckner ball between the legs. Baseball. I can tell you everything. The corkscrewed bat with Sammy Sosa. I called that one. I kept telling everybody that there's going to be a steroid scandal. I told everybody that these guys' heads were like the size of horses. I said, come on, dude. They're hitting Roger Maris numbers every year in the modern era. I just knew it wasn't correct. I mean, McGuire looked like he was, deformed, him and Sosa. And Barry Bonds, if you watched him back in the 90s when he was with the Pirates, he looked like a normal sized guy. And then he just becomes this big hulking beast, and all of a sudden it's that growth hormone, and everybody was like, oh, they're not cheating. I'm like, come on, they're cheating. I mean, it's when somebody cheats, they cheat. We know that even in this field, they cheat.
Well, there's a cheater in every avenue in all aspects of life. I think we all have proven that wherever you go. And for everybody listening, again, Josh, you coming on, if not to be rude, at the 52-minute mark, I got to do that 5-minute break thing to satisfy the podcasting and radio side. And thank you. And everybody in chat, thanks for coming on in. I appreciate the super chats and stickers and memberships already coming out there. So I do appreciate all of you. If I don't get to you, thank you. So we'll get on. You and I talked last week. And for today's show, it's when you hear a BMR or Josh, you get a lot of the paranormal and you get Bigfoot, werewolves, and Dogman. We might touch on that today, I think. But we had a fascinating discussion last week or 3 days ago. Kind of one of the topics I think we wanted to mull over a little bit about these different realms, these realities, these portals, these different dimensions. When we have dreams that are they real? What are they? Are they premonitions? Visiting people from our past. I mean, we went on and on. There were so many different topics we talked about, and you told me a couple things that were like, wow, and I for you. So I guess to get this all started, what's your view on because I think all these things come together when you're talking about cryptids, right? Mm-hmm. So here on our planet, in this universe, is it your opinion and what you've heard and what you've found out throughout your years? There's got to be more than one realm or one plane we're all existing on.
Oh, God. Yeah. I mean, I look at it like this. There's worlds within worlds.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then of each one of those worlds, there's an infinite number of alternates. And I think that we all have a finite timeline. And once that, and we all belong to a soul matrix. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
I believe that once the final piece is gone, like the last Rob dies, there might be a Rob that lives to be 110,
Yep.
And that Rob will eventually, that's it. Once that's done. And then, that's all the pieces are in place. But I think your essence essentially is the same. I don't think that there's like a really, really evil version of you if you're not inherently evil. I think that it runs the spectrum. What I've seen, like in what I would call like a waking dream, which is wholly different. WHO, that's not wholly as an HO, but
right.
What is wholly different about that is that you have different realities that are participating in your life all at the same time. And I think we kind of bleed in and out of those realities. And I think what's being done right now, like with CERN, okay, that's an example. What's going on in Switzerland. Like if you look at what they're doing, they're creating black holes. They're creating alternate timelines. They've built computers to literally connect with, parallel timelines. But if you look at how vast it is, there's an infinite number of these, right? And in each one of these alternate timelines, there's an entire universe within that timeline, and there's an infinite number of them. It's like you can't even fathom it. I was having a conversation with some people yesterday about God and about the magnitude of who and what he is. And people want to argue all the time about what God is and who he is and what he does. And I argue that he's not human-like. There is no humanity there. He's not a human. He doesn't have human characteristics. And somebody says, well, God needs to see and hear and this and like we do. I said, no, he doesn't. And if you come out of that dream state, that dream reality, that's kind of a real dream reality, and you go into and you bypass this world, which is an intermediate plane, I think it takes you to another place where everything is more real than real. And I've talked about that, but not at length, but I've talked about it where that is the real reality. And when you come out of your body at that point, you can see in all directions. There is no three-dimensional you don't see like a human being sees.
Yep.
You just, there is no hearing or seeing. You're riding vibrations and you're understanding everything as it is, as a vibration. And you can see everything all at once. And it's kind of like in a state of you just are. Okay. You're just being. And people always need something to fixate on. They need a beginning and they need an end when there is no beginning and there is no end, and they can't fathom it. But people, the way that we live in this reality, everything is linear. So they need something to say, this is where I'm at. This is where I've been. This is where I'm headed. And I know that there's a lot of Christians and Muslims who will argue with this. They don't believe that there was a big bang. I say there was, and I'll tell you why. I think that this universe was spun off from another universe. And I also believe that our universe, compared to theirs, like it may have been an experiment. Like it may have started off experimentally. It's very possible. I mean, and I have reasons why I believe that. It would take all day to sit here and tell you everything I've heard, read, and understand why. I believe that the universe went bang, but it was caused by something, which was and then their universe was caused by something. There is an infinite creator. There is a God. I do believe that. I do believe that Christ is his son, and I believe that in the Holy Spirit. I've said this before, but that doesn't take away from the way that we were created. The very beginning of life. Okay. Everything was put into place. We know our world is 4 billion years old. People want to argue and say it's 5,000. That's a crock, but whatever. This bang made a timeline that went like this and like this. We are like this. If you were to go back in time 4 billion years to the inception of the earth and then further back into the beginning of the universe, you would eventually go to that first point. Okay. The bang, right? And then if you went past the bang, you would go in the opposite direction, going back in time, the opposite direction. There were two timelines that were spun off from that. But I don't really believe they're linear. I believe they kind of loop around. That's what infinity is. It's hard to explain to people, and if you try to fathom it with your three-dimensional mind, you can't comprehend it because we need a 0 point, we need a beginning and ending, we need everything when everything just kind of is. And all of these things are still happening at the same time, which is almost impossible to fathom. People need order. They don't want chaos, even though the universe is absolutely chaos. And not to do a whole show about science, but this is what we're looking at. The universe being what it is, we know that it's constantly expanding.
Yeah.
And so my opinion, I told somebody one day when we were having a talk, and of course, it was a very theoretical talk, and it's where I do my best work, and that was at the bar. I'm joking. No, I was sitting on a bar stool, and I was telling somebody, and I was drawing it on a napkin. Well, it's not. You can't draw equations on a napkin, explain to them because they're already inebriated. They're not understanding. And I was sober, but I was trying to explain to somebody. I'm like, look, this is how it works, and these people weren't grasping it. Now you have to put everything in layman terms because even for myself, when I don't understand something or know something, I need somebody to explain it to me in layman terms because I'm not, familiar with this. So putting it into a nutshell, what we're looking at in our universe is a living being. It's almost like a baby, and as it grows, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And there are dark corners of this giant living being. Now, religion comes into play to try to explain things, but the problem is that religion is wrong, but it's also correct. It's really a how do you say it? What is the word I'm looking for? It's a paradox because yes, it is correct. Each religion has a lot of truth to it, but then there's also an incompleteness there. And I'm not one of these people that believes we should all throw the religions together and make one big happy family. That's not it either. That's not the answer. But working together would be a lot better to resolve and solve things than what we are doing now. And what we're doing now is I'm a Buddhist, you're a Christian, I don't like you, I'm not going to participate, I don't believe in Jesus. Christians, you're a Muslim, I don't like you, I don't participate, I don't believe in Muhammad or whatever. They believe in Jesus, but not the way we do, right? The Buddhists call him Maitreya. There's all these different words of Krishna and Hinduism. And the worst thing you could do is tell a Hindu or a Christian that they have a lot in common because they'll start fighting about it. They will fight with you, and they will fight with you, and they will fight with you. And they don't want to accept that there could be some truth to any other religion. They need the rigidity, and they need that absolute certainty that this is the way it is. There is no other way. But then when they're thrown a curveball, Now, hear what I'm going to tell you. Then they have to accept a little bit of reality, the real reality, not this sort of agreed upon reality. And I'll tell you this, within every person, there are 3 different persons. You have what I call, and I don't want to get into the id, the ego, and all that, because I reject Freud and all that. What I'm saying is, like, you have 3 parts. You have the one that the world sees. That's you, Rob, me. We're talking the whole world seeing us, whatever. Then you have the one that's you, okay, that you have agreed upon that this is you, right? That is the physical you that's presenting itself unto itself. Then you have the higher self. Now, you can argue there's different layers in between each one of these selves, but the higher self is the one that's always sober. No matter how much you smoke, but how much you drink or whatever you do, it's still there, and it's awake, and it's sober, and it's your conscious, subconscious watching you. The reason I personally call it conscious, subconscious is because it is your subconscious, but it's the truest form of you. And if you were to come out of your body, like really come out of your body, not just be attached to the silver cord and still have an avatar of yourself. I'm talking about being a ball of light, seeing in all directions. That's the real reality. That is the you, the real you. And it will feel like you're looking at and observing something that's not you and never was you, even though it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you step out of your vehicle. You step out of your vehicle and you go inside, and guess what? You put the keys down and you don't think about the vehicle. The vehicle's just out there. Right. And until you need it again, then you get back in the vehicle, whether you have a Tundra or a Titan or whatever you drive, and then you or a Hyundai, whatever, you get back in the car and you drive. Right. It's a lot like that. When you come out of your body and you're completely out of your body, you're that you don't even think about, the body is gone. You might as well be on another level of existence forever, even though you're not. You'll go back to it as long as it's still livable. But these have a finite timeline, and they will eventually die, and you will come out of the body and you'll be judged, and you have to go through what you have to go through. What people don't understand, or what they don't want to understand, because I think that everybody, it's on some level, does get it, but they want to reject it because it's not comfortable, is that this body is very, very temporary. It's like the lifespan of a car. You're going to be driving a car for only so long, and then you're going to have a different vehicle. Well, that's kind of how the body is. And eventually, when that expires, you're going to have to face the really real. And what I mean by the really real is you're going to face the true reality of who and what you are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's helpful to have a leg up and to kind of know where you've been and what you've done and where you're headed. Because if you don't, then it's going to be a real shock. And there's a lot of people who live their lives like, like there's no consequences. But if you were to search yourself and make the mind-body connection with the spirit, then you'll know, like, that's true discernment. And you'll be able to say, okay, I haven't been living my best life. I haven't been doing what I was supposed to be doing. And I'm in trouble. I need to right the ship. Well, that's a big problem. And then when people have had out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, they're jolted into another reality, and where they're forced to look at, okay, maybe my religion isn't giving me all the answers. And then they want to say, well, it was sort of a dreamlike state. No, there's a secondary level of dreamlike state. And you also have to remember, when you go into that dreamlike state, most of the time you're not looking at it from your really real self. You're looking at it from that intermediate self, the one that you think is really you, but it also includes this body. If you're looking at yourself in the afterlife as this body, you're not looking at yourself correctly, because this isn't who you are. It's what's powering the car is what's going to end up going to heaven or hell or to an intermediate state. That is the problem that people don't grasp. So a lot of times when people are looking and they see like something like these cryptids, for example, or a ghost or something, they're looking at it through a lens of, okay, this is the real me. But in reality, you still have that other you that's really in control and is kind of observing and recording everything. I don't know if people ever experience this in the chat. Maybe somebody can tell me. But if you're ever really alone and you're not on camera, nobody's listening to you, but you don't feel like you're really alone, it's not necessarily a spirit that's watching you, although that happens quite a bit. It's your really real self, the real you that's actually recording you. And there is something that we call the Akashic Records, and it's actually recorded by you. It's you that's recording it. It's the true you. And that is imprinted on you. And when you pass over, it's read. It's like it's an imprint. It's something that a lot of people don't want to accept. They don't want to believe. They think that, well, I'm not going to believe this. I'm not going to. But it's something you can only get to if you come out of your body, and if you don't, then you'll never see it.
Thanks for all that. It's lots to digest. And one of the reasons I brought this up too is we had a conversation not too long ago, and we're talking about the out of body experience and such. Now, for everybody, I'm a transparent person. I'm not religious. I believe in God. Okay, I believe in Jesus Christ. I don't go to church. Haven't been to church in 20 years, and that's just my choice. Growing up, I went to Catholic school, 1st through 7th grade, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And, I just never really went back to the church, right? Still believing, and I still say my prayers. That's mine. That's me. That's who I am. One night, and I was telling you this before, Josh, and some of the people that know me and have seen my show several times, I brought this up 1 or 2 times. I was reading on astral projection, right? And trying to figure this out. So I was alone in my house in a smaller room. I had this TV on, and I was doing some meditation. Okay. And I'm fully awake. I'm not dreaming. I'm not asleep. It wasn't sleep paralysis, and I'm sitting in a chair. And then I end up crawling down down a hallway, my hallway in my home, adjacent to the chair. And I'm thinking, Rob, why are you crawling on your hands and knees? I'm thinking to myself. And then I turned around, Josh and everybody listening, and I seen my physical body in the chair. Now I got to tell you something. Whatever it was, whatever I experienced, I don't know. I guess it was kind of an out of body experience. I don't know. But I will say this: when I look back over my right shoulder on my hands and knees and saw myself in the chair looking at the television during the playing of this meditation, that was terrifying. It was actually more terrifying, if you can believe, than my Bigfoot encounter that I had in 2018. So ever since this has happened to me, I've been grasping with this, and I've been looking up these certain things. I was one that believed that you could only have an out of body experience when you pass on. Perhaps you saw the light, or perhaps you saw darkness. So for me, that was terrifying, but I'm not terrified any longer about it. But it's something that it's a mystery to me as what exactly happened. And I'm wondering if this is a lot of the same things you were just talking about.
Well, one of the comments on here, I want to address somebody, and it just kind of, it's a chicken in the corn. I think I've seen him around before. Chicken in the corn says, I have to respectfully disagree. He says, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. He says, I believe this is blasphemy. Okay, chicken in the corn, what I'm going to tell you is I'm not a blasphemer. What I'm going to tell you, though, you're correct. To be out of your body, completely, truly out of your body, and not just in an intermediate state, is to be present with the Lord. What that means and what you're talking about is that is the state of being that God dwells in. That's where you will find God, is out of your body. That's where God and the heavenly realm exist. But you have lower levels too. You have the different heavens, and whether you believe it or not, there's multiple heavens. God sits at the very top. Going to heaven doesn't mean that you're going to be with God. Okay. You still, I believe, if you were to make it to heaven, you would still have work to do to try to get and transcend and be in the presence of the Lord. You will be in the presence of God at some point to be judged, but it's not an automatic thing. And what I'm going to tell you, you're probably not going to agree with it because it sounds like you're coming from a very staunch religious, and that's fine. I'm not really religious in the way I was at one time. I am of a Christian faith. I do believe that Christ was sent here by God to bring us out of this what's happening to us. And if you're new to this or learning about this, it is a lot to digest, as Rob said, and it's hard to understand or take. What I'm telling you, though, is my truth. And what, a lot of people use that. They'll be like, well, my truth is, and they'll tell you some crazy whatever because their truth isn't even a part of our reality. Everybody's truth is a little bit different, right? If Rob turns to the side and everybody just saw him from the side, they're going to think, oh, Rob looks like this. That's my truth. He looks this way in his side profile. He turns back and he looks at everybody. There's 4 people, maybe 2 of them don't look and see him from the front. Those other 2 people are going to give a different description of Rob from the front. You're going to look different from your side profile than you are from the front. That doesn't mean that they're wrong. That just means that they saw different aspects of Rob. You see what I'm saying? Like if you were driving by a street sign and you look to the side, all you're going to see, you didn't see the sign to you is just going to be a skinny piece of metal. That's all it is. You're going to be like, wow, that's a thin piece of metal. Somebody in the back seat at the same time is seeing it and they see the front or an angle of it and they see the speed limit, say 35. Then that's all they saw. They're both correct. They just saw different angles of the truth. But that is really part and parcel. That is what's going on. We see different aspects and different angles, and we all disagree and we think everybody's wrong. That's not correct. You can't say that. I mean, you can say whatever you want, but you can't be correct by saying, oh, this is blasphemy because you don't agree with how the spirit world works. What I'm telling you is what I've experienced. Now, we know that if God exists in the higher level, which I believe he does, I believe that is an all omnipotent level that we can't comprehend, right? That's his throne. The Holy Spirit is different. Now, that's a part of God. That's God's essence. We talked about it on our show last night at the beginning of it. That essence of God is what envelops all of us. That is what makes him omnipotent, is because of his Holy Spirit. That is the Spirit of God. Christ is the Son. Now, I'm not going to get into a whole religious sermon because there's no winning with that. All's going to happen is half the people are going to be like upset because I didn't preach Christianity the way that they believe, and the other half is going to be mad because I'm preaching Christianity. So that's all I'm going to say about that, and we're going to move on from that. But that is the Spirit, what we're talking about, the different levels and the different realities. And yes, there are different realities. And if we were created, it doesn't throw God out of the equation. I do not believe that the way that Genesis teaches, most people know that about me. I don't believe that's completely correct. I don't believe that because I don't believe that God has human characteristics. God in the Old Testament, it says, let us create man in our image, right? If God is doing all the creating, why would he ask, let us do and create God in our image? And another problem is that Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, which is what the Bible is predominantly based on, doesn't translate very good to English. When Jesus says the meek shall inherit the earth, let me ask the audience, how many people in the audience know what that means? And you can give me your answers here, and then I'll explain. Let me see if anybody, certainly we'll go back now. Let's see. Let's see here. It says, "Cause triune God." That's why I don't understand what that means. As far, why do you think that is? I believe the experience, or us is the Trinity. Well, okay, I'm going to explain something. It says Josh. It refers to Greek war horses. There you go. Thank you, Dick Richards. Dick Richards is actually a very permanent fixture over in PRT. Dick knows. Thank you for that, Dick. He's actually been on my show. He's a Canadian, but we'll forgive him. I like, but he's very smart, and he's right. They're war horses. See, it's basically saying that the war horses are going to inherit the earth. Now, you got to understand something too. The earth is not a big prize. The big prize is going to heaven. And of course, Christ is going to come and he's going to establish the new kingdom of Jerusalem, and he's going to reign for 1,000 years. And I've had people ask me that question too. They're like, 1,000 years is really not that long. It is if you look at it in terms of divine years. And if you look at it in a divine year, that's 365 years equals one divine year. So that's 365,000 years. Now, you may ask, why would that number be significant? Because in the Kali Yuga, it's 423,000 years, or 432,000 years, and it is the smallest yuga. And so the ancient Indian texts that even predate the religion of Hindu, and you don't want to call it Hindu, the Vedas, they tell us that there were 4 yugas, there are 4 cycles: the Satya Yuga, the Techa Yuga, and then you got the Dwapara Yuga and the Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga being the age of destruction. It's the end. That's where we're at. The Satya Yuga, people live to be 100,000 years. I'm not saying this is what I believe. I'm saying this is what they believe. And then morality was at 100%. Everything was done through the power of will, and people were literally like, 50 to 100 feet tall. They were giants. Everybody was a giant, and they had the ability to create through the power of will. Well, after a million years of that, I don't know the exact number. I'd have to look it up. You had the Tetra Yuga. Morality, evil was introduced into the world, and these are cycles that go on. They keep repeating over and over again. The Tetra Yuga, people lived to be 10,000 years, and morality was reduced by 25%. So 3 out of 4 people you met were righteous. They were still very good. But then you had the Dwapara Yuga. People's lifespans were reduced to 1,000 years. People got smaller. They were still giants, but they were smaller. And morality was reduced again by 50%. So 1 in 2 people were dastardly. You couldn't trust them. They weren't righteous. What happens in this time period? We had a flood. And it was pretty much the end of the Dwapara Yuga. And it signaled the beginning of the Kali Yuga, the age of destruction. We're now small, way smaller, and morality has been reduced again. So now 1 in 4 people are good. Whereas, in the second Yuga, you saw the one, it was, the opposite. But now, so if you had 4 people in a room, you have 1 person that's fully righteous. That's literally where we're at. Doesn't mean everybody's evil, but look at it, morality in the way that everybody has a very reduced sense of morality. They compromise their morality constantly. You see it everywhere you go. It's everywhere you go. It's everywhere you look. But that's part of it. That's part of the cycle that we're living in. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. And eventually, I believe that revelations will take place, and it's going to happen, and it's going to accelerate. But then God, he gives us the gift. He gives us a lifeline. He throws us a lifeline. That is his son. That was a sacrifice for us, not a sacrifice for him, because God didn't need sacrifices. They need to stop believing the Old Testament is God. God never needed a sacrifice, and he doesn't have human characteristics. God is something we can't fathom. If he did, I wouldn't worship him. If he looked like me and he was just a guy, I wouldn't worship him. And Christ never told anybody to worship him. That's an unpopular opinion. A lot of people don't like that when I say that, but it's the truth. Go read the Bible. I was reading a statistic the other day, and it was like they had done this study, and I was reading some magazine. I say the other day, it was probably a couple years ago, and it was asking a question about Christians, Jews, and Muslims, and how many of them had read their respective holy books. And we'll just go with Christianity for right now. 70% had not read the entire Bible, 71. And then you don't even know how many people are lying about it. Of Islam, it was about 60, because you're not supposed to be not reading the Quran if you're Muslim. That's a big no-no. And with Jewish people, it was really, really low. They claimed it was only like 14% or something like that. But it's part of that when they become, when they have their manhood, they have to recite the Torah, and it's the bar mitzvah. When they become a man, it's real young age, 13. You look at these religions, but more Jewish people are secular than any other religion, meaning that they accept that that's their faith, but they don't really practice it. But yet they've claimed to know their book. Christianity, though, if you focus on Christianity for a minute and they say, well, I've read the King James version of the Bible, that's a very watered down and condensed Reader's Digest version of the Bible. The Book of Enoch should be in the Bible. It's not. It's in the Ethiopian Bible. Coptic Christians observe it, but when you look at all these different types of Christianity, everybody thinks they're right, but there's all these different people that say, well, this is the way I believe, this is the way I believe. if you look at the people who read the King James Version of the Bible, which, like I said, is a very small and condensed and watered down version of the real Bible, that's not a very high number. You're not looking at a whole big, number of people. That's a problem, because if you're going, even if you're just going to believe in the Schofield, which I don't believe in, that's not me, and ignore 136 codices of the Gnostics and the different, that's fine. You don't have to accept all that. But there's all these different religions of Christianity, different sects of Christianity that do believe in that, like the Book of Tobit. That's in the Catholic Bible. It's not in the King James Version. They cut out a lot of stuff in the King James Version, and it doesn't make sense if you've read all these other books and then you go and you try to read the King James Version of the Bible, which I have. You're sitting there going like, I'm only getting part of the story here. There's like if you were to read a book, about someone's life, and you were missing most of it, that's a problem. And then you're trying to take the translations and translate it into English. We're walking around saying that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than is a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Do you know what that means? When Jesus talks about that, do you have any idea? You know that the word for camel actually is the same in Hebrew as rope. So it's saying a rope, a knotted rope going through the eye of a needle. It's not a camel walking through the eye of a needle, although analogous, it doesn't really matter because neither one of them can happen. But you're sitting there as a kid and you're going like this, why would it be a camel walking through the eye of a needle? Well, that's not really what it says. And then the Elohim, when it talks about the Elohim in the book of Job, it's really a collective. It's a plurality. And when it talks about Satan, where hast thou been walking to and fro upon and within the earth, it's actually the shaitan, as in plural. It's this good guy council versus a bad guy council. And the book of Job predates Genesis. And then you have the story of Abraham and Sarawati, which is found in ancient Indian tablets and Tamil culture. And then you have that story, which is supposedly Abraham, and but he was a Sumerian, right? And so it's a Sumerian story, but it's found in the Tamil culture, which predates it. But then they say, well, these were the original Hebrews. They weren't. The Hebrews didn't exist yet. And so you get Father Abraham. And none of it's making sense, because what happened was Israel was destroyed and they were taken in captivity by the Assyrians. And then they ended up being usurped by the Babylonians, the Mesopotamians, Babylonians, and then, of course, the Persians. And then the Persians' freedom said, go ahead and go on. We don't, whatever. They come back and they begin to write. 600 BC, they started writing all this stuff. And it's very similar. Like Noah it's kind of like he's Gilgamesh, which is a story that is way older than the story of Noah. But they put a name. We got 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So they put a name on there. And they said, well, we're going to give him a name. We're going to call him Noah. And then the flood. The whole world was flooded, right? Wrong. Not correct either. It was a regional flood, and the Levant in particular. But we'll get back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, for the insight. I had something I wanted to comment on, but you were on such a roll that I was going to just let you roll with it. It was fantastic. We'll come back. We have to take our 5-minute break, and we'll change up the topic a little bit, but we'll continue on so you can finish up. And in 5 minutes, we'll be back with our break for our sponsors, Josh Turner, Paranormal Roundtable. We will be back in 5 minutes.
desperate on my knees to break. And I hear the voice of an angel telling me not to
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bigfoot Mystery Rob on YouTube with Josh Turner, Paranormal Roundtable. Fantastic show, fantastic guest. Quick mention, thank you to Hawk, Mike A again, Spilling Tea, and Mike A again for gifting memberships. Thank you for those of you that became a member, and I also want to thank Jay for the super sticker. Fantastic. Thanks very much for that. I appreciate that. The support is well received and welcomed and thanked by myself. We've got shows throughout the week. On Mondays is Texas Front Porch on Texas Front Porch. Please subscribe to Taxi. Comes on 7 o'clock Central, 8 in the East. Tuesdays, Beyond BMR with myself and Krista from the Blondes and Booze. We are on 8 Central, 9 in the East on Tuesday night. Wednesday, the Diva Dimension on Texas Front Porch, 9 Central, 10 in the East. Back here with me on Thursday with Tex. Brunch with Bigfoot Michigan Rob, 1 o'clock in the East. That's of course, noon Central. Later on, Thursday nights is the Blondes and Booze Paranormal Podcast, 8 Central, 9 in the East. If you need some more woo with the booze, well, Friday nights, you got a little woo, the Blondes, the Booze, and the Woo, the Paranormal Podcast. 9 o'clock, 8 Central, 9 in the East. Tex is doing something Infamous Minds. It's true crime. It's on this channel. It's 3 p.m. It's Saturday. Go check it out. Thank you for everybody who bought my book so far. Bigfoot Michigan Rob presents True Cryptid Encounters, found on Amazon. Do me a favor. It's all about analytics. When Amazon comes calling, leave a review because that helps push sales. And also, I'm going to have the links for Josh's 2 books. He just released 2 books. Fantastic reads. Go check them out. I'll have the links for Josh as well. Moderators out there, drop the links to all the channels and to the books for Josh and our team here with BMR and so on and so forth. Thanks once again for coming on in. And I'm going to bring Josh back up.
Hey, guys.
I got to tell you, man, that was very, what you talked about the first hour of the show. I got a lot out of that, and some people can take it, some people can leave it, but that's why I do the shows, and we can talk about these things. And I personally enlightened a few things that I would think about. Again, I mentioned, this reminds me of this story. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I haven't been to church in quite some time. Thanks, Josh. And I must say, this happened to me about a year ago. And I was at Kroger. It was right around Christmas time. It would be almost a year ago. And so I'm going down the lines. Thanks to Shadows for that. So I was in Kroger. I was looking for hot sauce because BMR loves hot sauce, anything hot sauce. So I said out loud in Kroger, "What aisle is the hot sauce?" I said this aloud, and then, my phone goes off. Now, we all know about advertising. When you pick up your phone and you type in Lowe's, you type in you need a new bathroom curtain, you get all the advertising is directed right at your phone. But this was different because I said it aloud. And my phone, within a second, it gave me where to go, aisle 17. I'm like, wow, kind of weird, kind of strange. So I turned down aisle 17, and here I'm in heaven. I got every single hot sauce a man could desire. I'm reading the bottles. I'm liking all the pretty marketing, the labels. I'm reading everything, and I'm really getting into it. I'm filling up my cart. Now, about 6 feet from me to my right is an older woman. She was very petite, couldn't be over 5 foot. She was older, long gray hair and a ponytail. And she was looking at me kind of oddly from 6 feet away. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, again, not getting back to the religion thing, I believe in God, and that's where I'm going to leave it. But BMR, I don't have any medallion. I don't have any crucifixes in my pocket. I don't wear a cross. The only cross I had was back when I got my first Holy Communion, when you got the Bible book and you had the rosary in it. So that's the only cross that I bear. And I looked at this lady, and we made eye contact, and she smiles at me, very sweet smile. And she says, "God be with you." And I'm like, "Well, thank you." I thought it to be odd, but then it was an older woman, and she was being nice. It's Christmas time. And again, I don't carry anything on myself when it comes to crosses or anything, crucifixes. I don't wear that much jewelry. I happen to have a coat on, and I'm a very adamant about checking my coats and making sure there's no change or anything in them when I wash them. I'm anal about that. And I had this coat on, which, by the way, has zippers in the pocket, and the pockets were zipped. And so I looked down at a hot sauce, and then for whatever the reason, Josh and everybody listening, I unzipped my one right coat pocket, and she was to my right, 6 feet away. I reach inside my pocket. And I don't know if you guys can see this, but I open my coat pocket, and this is a crucifix with Jesus on it. It was in my pocket, and I've never, ever in my life had anything like this. I look up to my right to go to this woman because I just felt like there was some connection there. And I'm going to tell you something. We're in the middle of the aisle. And to get to the end of the aisle, it's probably another 60 feet. And she was gone. She was gone. And I was like, whoa, what just happened there? And I know that she didn't sprint down the aisle. She was older. It would take a couple minutes to get down there. And ever since that day, I had to wonder about these things that we hear about. And Josh, I told you the story about the flag and my father, how all of a sudden that I found that pin after hours of searching. And I finally asked my dad after 7 years being passed on, please, Dad, help me find this little screw. And I found it. I got to tell you, that makes me wonder that there's a lot out there. There's a lot out there that I just can't. It just befuddles me.
Well, I mean, a lot of weird things happen. A lot of weird things happen, and it seems like it's impossible, but it's not possible. And we know that it's not impossible. I can tell you this, I know that it makes people uncomfortable to hear about, and I'm not talking religion. People call it religion.
Right.
I'm not a religious person. I follow Christ. But when we were talking about the alternate realities, the different realities, different timelines, there is a story in just about every country in the East of Jesus, of Jesus, and he was there. And when he was gone for almost 2 decades in the Bible, in the Gospels, they don't give an account where he was at. Now it does in other books, but in our King James version of the Bible, and what we believe is the accepted version of the Bible, we say Jesus, that it's like he's just gone. We don't really know. But then he reappears and he seems kind of agitated, and he goes after the Pharisees and he tells them, you're wrong. He goes into the temple. He gets upset. He gets agitated. Where was he for those years? Well, I think he was on the Silk Road. He was traveling through the East, because there are records of him all through the East, from Nepal, Bangladesh. There's all these different records of this, of Jesus, of this man that they said that was like a prophet. He was a prophet. It goes all the way to Japan. But the West, they want to be like, well, no, Jesus belongs to us. He was our guy. And what ends up happening is you have a stifling in the Council of Nicaea. What they did, I can't even tell you like how much they messed things up, because they took so many books out of the Bible. They changed everything around. They followed the Code of Deuteronomy, which allowed them to make war. They put an emphasis on the Old Testament, which is a very, it's a book. It's an eye for an eye. It's, you can do this, you can do that. You can kill everyone. If you're fighting a war, you're allowed to go in and slaughter everything, including the animals. God is an angry, vengeful, jealous God. Runs very anathema to what Jesus tells us in the New Testament, that God is love and he's light and he's holy. But Jesus, when he confronted the Pharisees, he told them, he says, your father is not my father. He says, your father is Shaitan, and you're of the synagogue of Shaitan. That didn't go over too well with them. Now, they can twist and turn and say that the Romans did this and that, but it was at the behest of the Pharisees that he died. And the truth is the truth, and it's always going to come out. And a lot of people don't like what I say, and it makes them uncomfortable and the nature of reality. But I promise you, like, there's not many things I'll promise you about, but you will one day. You will know how the nature of reality works. People can say whatever they want. They can call me a blasphemer. They can call me whatever. I don't care what you say. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is, when you pass on, you will know how it works. You will learn. Some people learn before that. Not many, but some do. I'm not saying I have all the answers. It's a constant learning process. It's hard when you're in a physical body to learn about the spirit. But, and I sound like I'm beating a dead horse, I talk about this on the show constantly, read. Just read. I mean, and don't just read the King James Version of the Bible, because everybody's like, well, I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to go read the Bible again. That's like if somebody gave you instructions to how to put together a chair. Well, guess what? And those instructions aren't right. You're never going to put that chair together, ever. You could read those instructions 1,000 times 1,000, and you're never going to be able to put that chair together because those instructions are incomplete. They're missing the second part and the seventh part and whatever. So go ahead, read the Quran, read the Bible, read whatever book you want to read. It's not going to change anything. You're just going to keep going in circles. And that's fine if you want to believe in that as the absolute word, whatever book it is you read, whether it's the Veda, the King James, or the Quran, and different forms of whatever book that you want to read. But if you don't read the whole enchilada, you don't tell me that you know about the nature of reality, because you don't. It's laid out there by people that died thousands of years ago. And each religion has a vested interest in keeping everyone away from the other religions. And in fact, different sects of Islam, like the Sunnis and the Shiites, they'll tell you the other one's wrong. The same thing with Catholics and Protestants, the other one's wrong. Don't get involved with those Baptists because we're Catholic, and the Baptists are like, don't get involved with the Methodists because we're, it doesn't matter. The Amish believe that we're all going to hell. That's because of technology. So we're supposed to go ride in a horse and buggy. That's not correct either. But I mean, who is really correct? My truth isn't going to be your truth. I understand that. But one thing you have to understand that you do have to grasp is it's time to be big boy and big girl, whatever, and put on the big boy pants and start looking at the real nature of reality. It's not what you think it is. And it never has been. And I could go really, really deep on this, which is going to be part of the UAP project I'm going to do. I would if you want in private, you get a lot of donations tonight, man. Look at this.
Yeah. Thanks to everybody. I love y'all. I got y'all down here. I'll thank y'all at the end of the show. Thank you so much, Shelly, for that. And everybody. Anthony, I could go through Josh donating some memberships.
Yeah, I did the membership, sir.
Mm-hmm. Thank you to everybody. If I missed you, Chad's going kind of fast, and I'm listening to Josh, and hey, I do appreciate each and every single one of you. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.
Yeah, we haven't broken 200 people yet. Maybe because of the subject. They don't like the subject. Maybe we could change it.
we could maybe switch it up a little bit. But I got to tell you something on that, and it's okay because hey, I'm here to provide a show. I have a great guest, and I like the topic. I'm not here to get all the views and have 1 million people in here because I'm comfortable with this, and I don't mind sharing it. And I appreciate you talking about it. We can change it up. I've got a story similar to this, and what we're talking about, how people follow these religious figures, which, again, why I haven't been to church in 30 years. In my book, there's a story I got in about this preacher man in southern Mississippi, a very destitute town, okay, very poor. Nobody worked or had a job. There was no industry, no retail, nothing. And this preacher, he went from town to town, okay, congregation to congregation. He never spent more than a year there. And he's telling me this, okay? And so I'm like, okay, well, continue on. And he goes on to say that he lost his faith and he thought that Jesus or God left him. I'm like, well, continue. So long story short, he goes to his first congregation ever as the new preacher in this southern Mississippi town. And this young couple, I think their name was Susan and Bob, I can't recall. They came up to him and said, look, sir, preacher, whatever his name, whatever you went by, we've been getting visited at night at our window from this demonic looking dog. It looks like a Doberman Pinscher, but it's white. It had red eyes, and it comes to our bedroom window each and every night. And it stares in at us, and telepathically, it communicates to leave the town, to get out. Otherwise, something's bad's going to happen to you. So this couple told this preacher man, this transient preacher man, as I like to call him, he looked at this young couple and told them that the Lord can't help him. That, in fact, he told them to go seek mental help, a doctor, and he even had the gonads, the balls, tell them not to come back to church and listen to any of his sermons until they got help. So this young couple, they looked at this man of faith, supposedly, where they don't know what to do. They're lost. A couple weeks go by. They come up. He doesn't let them in. Physically had people tell them not to come in into the preaching. Now this young couple, they're starting to look very haggard and they're looking very sickly. So one night he gets a message that this young couple who he turned his door on him, the man murders his wife and then he took his own life. Now, this is where this preacher really gets. This is when he gets on his knees, I guess, and he's praying, right? So this gets out into the town. So the sheriff and all the people that ran this town, they decide to get together and they want to have a town meeting about what happened. So the preacher tells his story. And again, he breaks down on his knees. He starts crying in front of this whole congregation of people. The sheriff comes up and puts his hand on this preacher's shoulder and says, I know where you're coming from. I've experienced that same entity come to my window. This Doberman pinscher with the red eyes, the white Doberman pinscher with the red eyes. And now the sheriff leaves, another person, and another person. Before you know it, several people came up and said they were experiencing the same things, and they kept it all to themselves. They never told anybody, although within their certain little niche or their little group of people, right? And so this priest is like, well, how come nobody came forth with this? And they said, well, your attitude with this young couple was that of, hey, go seek medical attention. So long story short, getting to the end of this preacher says, well, he wants no part of this town or this community. And then the morning he's deciding to leave town. Thanks, Mike. So before leaving, he gets to his front door. He has his bags packed, ready to go on yet to another town, because that's what this guy does. And on the front doorstep of his porch, there's a basket. Now this basket's got a blanket over it. And the blanket, inside this basket, something's moving. There's something moving. So he goes, he reaches down, he reaches into the basket. And lo and behold, there's a puppy of what appears to be allegedly a white Doberman pinscher. He grabs up this basket with the puppy in it, proceeds to the sheriff's office, drops it off at the sheriff's office, the desk, what have you, and he splits town. And then he told me in his communication, this is the last communication with you. And then I asked him, hey, I'm writing a book. Can I use it? He goes, go for it. I'm like, thank you. And I was like, wow. I mean, that's one of the stories in the book that just floored me and wowed me. If somebody could turn away people, you're supposed to help people, but this whole town, Josh, seemed to know about this. It kind of reminds me about a creepy Stephen King novel, if you ask me.
Well, I mean, Gandhi was turned away by the Hindus, and that was one of the reasons why he chose Islam. So, and of course, when Jesus was there too, he spent supposedly 6 years with the Brahmins, and they eventually got into it with him, and he left because he didn't believe in the caste system. And I think that Jesus studied a lot of different things. I mean, I think he found his divinity. Because if you read the book of Thomas, which is in the King James Version of the Bible, he actually, when he was a child, he pushed another child off of a roof and killed him. And people are like, oh, no, that couldn't have happened because Jesus was perfect. But Jesus lifted him up and brought him back to life. He's like, look, calm down. And he's like, he's fine. Just like when Lazarus passed away, it's a very, I talked about this in the Bible. It's in the Bible. When my mother had died, I talked a little bit. I guess I preached a little bit at her funeral. And Lazarus was, his sisters were, Mary. They were Mary Magdalene. They were aggrieved. And they came and they sought Jesus, and a messenger told him, they said, Lazarus is ill. You need to hurry. And of course, Jesus didn't pick up the pace. He just kind of took his time. And then Lazarus dies. And everybody's kind of upset with Jesus. They're like, you can do miracles. You could have stopped this man from dying. Why did you take your time to pick fruit and do all this other stuff? And he gets there and the women are crying. And he cries with them. And I had somebody kind of snarky. They told me, well, if this is the Son of God and he's a perfect man, why would he be crying with them when he knew he could heal him and bring him back from the dead? And I said, he was crying over the human condition. He was crying because Mary and they were crying. He was crying because of their grieving heart. He was empathic. And he's like, just relax. I got this. And he called him back. And Lazarus rose from the dead. And then somebody asked me this smarty mouth question. I was at a camp in Oregon when this happened. I was on a cherry farm, believe it or not. I was picking cherries in my late teens. Yeah, I wasn't in a very great place in my life to be in the Dallas picking cherry. I was like, I'm not really doing much with my life. I got broken down. I had to get my uncle to try to give me a money wired to me. Back then we didn't have Cash App. I'm old. I'm in my late 40s compared to to young people, we're old. Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah. They're like, oh, you're an old man. You're 40 something, whatever. I got broke down. I go to a Burger King, and then I got a ride from this guy. And he gives me a ride. I'm in Idaho, in Boise. Gives me a ride. Nice guy. Him and his wife, farmers, whatever. And they take me to the Western Union. I get some money and got on a bus and came home. Lost my car. My car was a mess. And my dad was like, well, that's what, yeah, of course you failed. That's all you do is you fail. That's what you do when you're young. You fail. But I was in this camp, and I was talking to these guys, and they were actually loggers. And I had gone off to this place far from where I was at, miles near the Columbia, on the other side of the Columbia River. And I was talking to these guys who were taking, they were loggers, whatever. They were in this bar, and I was in there. I always looked older than I was. And I was drinking. And we started talking about Jesus, and this guy's like, well, I don't believe in Jesus. There's no historical proof of this guy, blah, blah, blah. And we started talking about it, and I talked to him, and he was talking about, well, if Jesus was so powerful, why didn't he come down off the cross? I was like, because if he would have done that, we wouldn't have the religion of Christianity we have now if he'd have just lived to be really old. But going back to where he was traveling on the Silk Road, each one of those countries has legends of him. Some of them have him dying there. Some of them have him had a family and living. So people say, well, that couldn't have been Jesus because he died on the cross, at Calvary. Yes and no. It goes back to what we were talking about, infinite timelines. If anybody could live multiple lives at the same time, it was him. So when somebody says, well, did Jesus live in Japan and did he pass away? I was like, maybe. But, well, how did he die on the cross? I was like, Jesus was a person unlike any other. He could have done all those things at the same time. He turned water into wine. He fed 5,000 people with fish. He did all these things. How hard would it be? If you can raise the dead, how hard would it be to live multiple lives? It wouldn't. He could do it. And I do agree with the Mormons in one way. I do believe that when Jesus returned, that he went to the New World, which would have been where we're at now, and he ministered to the Native Americans. I believe they saw him. I believe that part is correct. I spent some time with the Mormons. I met a few. I used to love to go to Brian Head when I stayed in Vegas. It was like a home away from home. I liked it. Cool place. And I wouldn't argue with them, but we would debate, And then when I was in Chicago, I would argue with my Jehovah's Witnesses. I would tell them, okay, I've read the Book of Knowledge. I don't agree with it, but I respect that you believe it. They don't put as much emphasis on Christ as they should. That's a problem for me. And I spent time in lots of different places discussing religion and theology with a lot of different people, Anglicans, Episcopalians, Methodists, different types of Islamic individuals from all walks of life, Berbers, Arabs, Africans. And I didn't just come to a conclusion one day and said, you know what? I believe this, and I'm going to make everything else fit that parameter, because that's what a lot of people do. That's what a lot of people do. Instead of finding the truth and fitting yourself and your soul into that box that needs to be put into, people go around and they shape their religion to fit what they want.
Right.
And it's very comfortable to be in the know and be like, I figured this out. This is what I believe. But when you stop and you look at it realistically, does that make sense? Because a lot of it doesn't make a lot of sense. How can God in the Old Testament be a warlike, angry, jealous, by his own admission, jealous, but then in the New Testament, he's a different guy. And they said, well, the old God wanted blood sacrifice. And like I said last night on my show, the only thing that wants blood sacrifice are demons. That's not a God. God doesn't do that. That is man doing that. And all these human characteristics that they attribute to God, that is mankind wanting to be godlike. And we make the mistake of reading about their hubris and thinking that that's correct, because it was translated by men. Whether it was the Quran or the Bible, and they'll argue all day long, that's not correct. Yes, it is. And fallible people made up these stories. If you read the Old Testament cover to cover, read it twice. Go back and you read the Epic of Gilgamesh. Go back and read the Sumerian tablets. Guess what? It's a copy. They just made the stories fit, their narrative. Abraham and Sarah. That's the story of Abraham, or Ibrahim, depending on which region, and Sarawati. And I hate to break it to people when I tell them that. They get mad. I had a guy throw a rock at my head in front of a Methodist church, Bob. He tried to brain me with a rock. I was all of 18 years old, and I had the audacity to tell this guy that he was wrong. But I was on vacation, once again, in Oregon, which is, my dad loved Oregon. We went and traveled there, and we were at a place called Crystal Lake. I know, Lake Crystal, right, Jason?
Yeah, right, Jason.
But it's a place up in Oregon, and we camped all over Northern California. And I was with a group of teenagers, and they were teasing me. I got lost. This is a true story. I've never told this on my show, folks. I'm going to tell you right now. I got lost. And I found some teenagers, and I said, I'm trying to find my way back to my camp. I had walked around the other side of the lake, just had a stick and was swinging it around the ground, and just looked up, and I was like, where am I? I was 11 years old. Or no, I was 9. I was 9 years old. And these older kids, they were smoking some dope.
Mhm.
Not my thing. I was a little kid, and they're like, hey kid, you want some, this and that? And then they're laughing. And I said, no, thank you. And one of them decided that he was going to be a bully, and he pushed me into the lake.
Okay.
And the other 3, there were 4 of them. There were 3 boys and a girl. And the girl and one of the guys said, come on, man, don't do that. And they're like, why are you picking on this? He's a little kid. And I got up. I wasn't a violent kid, at that time. I didn't have a lot of meanness in me. And I stood up, and I went to a Christian school, so it was ingrained in me, and it was embedded in me and in my brain just to say this. And I said, Jesus loves you.
Mm-hmm.
Then he comes up and he grabs my face and he slaps me, not super hard, but he slaps me, and he goes, say it again. And I did. And then there was a bigger kid there, and he grabbed him. And he's like, and the kid's name was Joe. I don't remember all their names, but I remember him. And this bigger kid grabs him, and he says, Joe, why are you being like this? The kid, he's just a kid. And he's like, where are you supposed to be? I said, I don't know. I think my parents' camp is that way. And that other kid was like, I'm just having fun. He tries to trip me. I just kept walking. I ignored him. And as I was walking, the girl walked next to me. She's like, how old are you? I said, I'm 9. She goes, I'm 14. And I said, nice to meet you, 14. And they all kind of laughed. And then I started talking, and they walked me back to their camp. And one of the older kids said, I'm going to go and see if his parents are down. And I gave him a description, because there were some weird people that were kind of next to them. So this other kid, he was like 16, and he walks over to find my parents. And he was gone for like an hour. For that hour, there were 8 children there. I remember they were all teenagers, a lot older than me. I stood on a tree stump and I ministered to them. 4 of them in that day, I convinced to accept Christ, to get saved. There were a couple of older kids there, 18-year-olds. They weren't interested in hearing what a little child had to say. But by the time I was done talking and my parents had come back with this kid, I had finished talking to these children about Christ. And my mother told me she was beaming with pride. She said it was one of the proudest days she'd ever, and this, I told her the whole story, how the kid slapped me, pushed me into the water. It didn't shake my faith, and I wasn't afraid because God was with me. I believed that. I always believed that. So I've always pursued Christ. I've always pursued to try to find the truth about Christ. So when I tell you, I'm giving you the information that I know to be true. I'm not telling you that I'm a perfect person or that I'm holy. All I'm telling you, and I'm not telling you I'm a know-it-all, that I have all the answers, but I've been pursuing this for a long time. It's something that I don't take lightly. And I've been doing this since I was a small child. I accepted Christ when I was 6 years old. And every now and then I would doubt. So I would just reaffirm it. And I'd be like, God, in the name of Jesus, I come unto you. And I said, Jesus, come into my heart. Save me from my sin. And that's all you got to do. I mean, it's a very simple prayer. And it says, I give my life to you. Because Jesus is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And I tell God, please, and thank you. It's a blessing. Allow Jesus to come into my heart. I want to be saved. I want salvation from this world. People don't understand what that is. It's not just a walk with God or Christ. What it is you reaffirming your belief, casting out any doubt, and turning everything over to God, and then getting discernment, and then you can go forward. And then all these things that happen will fall into place the way they're supposed to. You live your life and you do the best you can. You'll have the bullies that will come and slap you. Now, somebody got smart with me one time, a friend of mine, and I told him that story. I never told my audience. And he says, well, why did God allow that kid to slap you? I was like, why wouldn't he? Life's going to slap you every day. Are you going to fold and not stand up and say Jesus loves you because the world slaps you every day? I mean, there it is right there. So that being said, I'm going to move on from that. I'm not trying to bore people or make people think I'm this good, holy guy, because I got my flaws. I had anger toward the world, toward people. Rob knows that. Rob have talked at length.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But I can tell you this. Not everything you're going to encounter in this world is a demon, and not everything is an angel. It's not that cut and dry. The world is not as simple as you want it to be. Now, you can turtle in and make it simple. That's up to you. You have that option to completely put on blinders and ignore everything, but that's not why we're here. If you're here in this chat and you're watching this show, I'm taking it that you don't want the blinders on. You want to see. And so I apologize if anybody's offended, but I don't apologize for my belief, and that's not something I'm going to apologize for ever, because that's not correct. But if you're bored and you don't want to hear it, I understand. So here's what I'm going to tell you right now. I believe that Christ is the way for other reasons. When people have come to me and they've given me stories of alien abduction, or they've encountered a werewolf creature, a dogman, whatever you want to call it, or a Bigfoot with red eyes that wants to harm them, these creatures that obviously they're emanating evil to them, or a demon, a shadow person in their bedroom. 90%, I'd say 90, not a full 10, because you know what? A lot of those people that do this, they're not saved by the blood. So they just cry out. But even then, God will hear them. But when they say, Christ, help me, he does. And it stops. And there's so many people, I've asked people, I said, have you, when these beings were taking you to go and do whatever it was they were going to do, at any point, this one woman was abducted several times. Her name was Cheryl. I said, Cheryl, let me ask you a question. She lived up in Tacoma. I said, You were abducted multiple times. And then she also ran face to face with the Sasquatch while she was hiking. At any time, did you think to cry out to Christ? And she says, yeah, I did a couple times. It didn't work. I said, let me ask you this. Have you ever accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior? She says, no. So I told her, I said, if you buy a car and it breaks down, they're going to ask you if you have a warranty. Well, I didn't get that. I didn't get the warranty. I thought I'd just buy it and maybe you could take care of it. Well, it's a contract. And I told her that. I've had people that I've brought to Christ, and I don't brag or talk about this. This is not something that they oh, you're going to get a reward in heaven. I don't do things to go to heaven, and I don't do things to avoid hell. Those things don't come into my mind. You do them because that's the right thing to do. When you bring someone to Christ and then they go fall back into their witchcraft and doing what they're doing, it's on them. I did what I was supposed to do. I said the prayer with them. I brought them. I tried to tell them to do this, this, and that, but it's ultimately up to them. And if they choose to go fall into that, back into what they were doing, then it's ultimately their choice. I can't change that because I've had people judging me my whole life. And they're like, well, that person, you brought them to God, but, well, look at what they're doing. Yeah, they're a sinner. So am I. It's not for me to judge. Maybe they need to try again and again and again. And then people ask how many times we're supposed to forgive. You're supposed to forgive an infinite number of times. That's forgiveness. That's what you're supposed to do. Just like I said on my show last night about praying for D.A. Roberts. People are like, well, D.A. Roberts doesn't like you. I don't care. God loves him. Jesus loves him. So we're supposed to forgive and we're supposed to pray for him. And I had a couple people I had to we're not on speaking terms anymore because they had some nasty things to say about me wanting to pray for that man. I said, you have enemies. Do you want your enemies to send you bad energy and bad thoughts and derision while you're at your lowest? I don't. Yep, exactly. Adam Paulson says free will. Miguel Guerra says exactly, Josh, I would give someone my last $20 or the shoes off my feet for I know that I will be protected by the will of God. I knew that at a young age, do the right thing and help others. I'm going to say something to the audience here. There's a test you can do for yourself. A test you can do for yourself. If you lost everything tomorrow, I mean, I'm talking you lost everything. Put yourself in that position. You know what that means? You lose your job, your wife leaves you, or God forbid somebody dies in your family. You're stricken with an illness and you are at your lowest point and you've lost everything. Would you still follow? Would you still believe? Would you still treat everybody with kindness and dignity? That's the question you have to ask. If you were living I'll be generous. You have a loincloth and a sign that says, I will work for food. Would you still believe? Would you still follow? See, because when I was young, I lost my job. My girlfriend left me. My car broke down, which was my job. I had, and I was at my lowest point in my life. And I got on my knees. I was sick too. I had this upper respiratory infection and couldn't get rid of it. It was like I was cursed. I don't know who would have cursed me at that time in my young age, but I got down on my knees and I told God that day, I was like, no matter what happens, I walk through the street naked and people throw fruit at me for the rest of my life. I will still serve you. I will still love you and I will never turn away. And God heard me and he lifted me up. And I slept in my car at one point. It's not always easy. It's not always pretty. That's just life. But that's what allows you to move forward and learn and grow. And I think if everybody did that, I'm not telling you what to do, but if everybody did that, I think we'd be a lot different people. We'd have a lot more understanding of the nature of reality in the world around us. I think we'd understand more about what a Bigfoot is and about what a dogman is. I can't tell you, that I'm correct 100%, but it happens. People come face to face with these creatures, and I'm going to say this: people are ill prepared for these things. There's a lot of our friends, Rob, that like to go out in the woods and they want to look. I want to find one of these things. What are you going to do when you find it? Are you going to negotiate with it? I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. Boots on the ground, boots on the ground. Yeah, I get it. Boots on the ground. I'm guilty. I go to places and I look at stuff too. And I've been doing it for years. Hernandez Ranch, I mean, I wasn't alone. I went out there with my people, but you don't think I was afraid? I mean, they're like, go over to that tree line. I'm not going to go to that tree line. Why don't you go to the tree line?
Right.
And I'm like, they're there. I mean, it's right there. Face the monster. It's like Salem's Lot where he says, face the monster. There it is. You could see something moving in that tree line. And there's these weird howls. And it's getting dark. I'm not going to say that I'm the bravest person in the world, but I'm not a chicken. And I'm not a coward, man. But I know that there are certain things that you shouldn't tempt. You're not supposed to tempt God. Well, God, I'm going to lay down these railroad tracks and you're going to save me. Okay, he gave you common sense along with your free will. Use it. And some people, they say, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find these werewolves. I'm going to find these Bigfoot. And God bless them. They're more power to you. I'm good with that. I've been in some of these places and you can feel this energy crawling on you. And it's not correct. It's not natural. You shouldn't be there. My friend Lyle Blackburn, he came to Austin recently to play in his band Ghoul Town. I wanted to go to support him. I don't agree with everything that goes along with heavy metal music or whatever. I don't really listen to it much anymore. He's a friend of mine, but when I found out that he was playing at Elysium and at a vampire ball, I had to decline. I couldn't. I said, I'm sorry, I can't make it. And he went out of his way to get us on the guest list, and I felt bad. Apologies to Lyle, but I'm not going to go to a vampire ball. I know what kind of people go there. I know what kind of people they are. I know what they do. And you're asking for attachments. And that's just not me. That's not my thing. I'm not going to do it. And, you go to these places, you're asking for an attachment, whether it's a haunted building or a house, whatever, a piece of land. When you look at the Bell Witch, it started off with a creature, a hairy creature in the woods in the cornfield, right? And then from there, all this wackiness ensued, and everybody's always like just telling the story of the witch and the haunting. Remember, it started with a cryptid. Before, I don't know if I've talked about this in depth. When my former co-host Armando died, him and Johnny Henderson. Okay, I'm going to tell you something, folks. When they passed away, they died 2 days from each other. Johnny Henderson and Armando Salazar. Everybody was looking into this Bell Witch. I was talking with Elijah, he's still alive, in the Cryptid Studies Institute. And I get a call from Jason Bland. He's from Paranormal Soup. Comes out on Sundays. Great guy, great show. Go check him out. He's going to be out tomorrow night. He's always awesome, does an awesome job. He calls me up and he says, hey, Josh. He talks, and he says, I heard you were sick. I said, yeah, I'm ill. I got the vid, And he's like, yeah. He's like, you're looking into this Bell Witch. There's a curse attached to that. And I told Jason, I said, yeah, I've heard. He's like, I'm just telling you, be careful. Be really careful with that because a lot of people have done projects about it and something has happened to them. Johnny Henderson was telling his family, and we talked about this at my first conference, that something was coming to his bedside like a hag. I was getting out of the shower and I saw something in the corner of my bathroom. It wasn't my wife. It was like a woman with stringy, scraggly hair. She was tall and thin and sickly looking. Freaked me out. This is what happens when you look into these things. Something can happen to you. You have to be protected. And I feel scared for these people who are not protected by Christ. Because if you're not and you go out looking for these things, well, something at some point is going to happen. Ken Gerhardt, he's a very secular guy. He's not a Christian by any means, but he's like, look, I'm not one to play around and with all this stuff. But he goes, I don't mess around. He's like, I would rather err on the side of caution. We talked about the curse and all that. And he goes, I know there's a curse attached to the Bell Witch. And he said, I'm not a believer. He's like, but I'm not going to tempt fate. And he told me, he goes, if I were you, I would stop. And I did. Eventually, I and my wife got well. I was so sick. I had the Delta strain. And my colleagues passed away. I don't know if it's because of that. I can't say 100%, but if I had to take a guess, I'd say it probably didn't help that they were, I don't know what all Armando was researching and looking into. It could have been more, but I never asked his late wife, and I didn't think it appropriate. But I know that he died, around the same time as Johnny Henderson. And I think that there is something to be said for that. I also believe that we ourselves can do an awful lot of damage by not being protected and going to places and opening ourselves up, looking for things, turning over rocks, going to places where there's some bad energy there. Something dwells there.
Yeah, I can talk ad nauseum about that. I experienced a lot of bad energy growing up, and I got to tell you, it's something that I'm not scared of, but because I believe in certain things, I don't want these attachments. I don't want any of this bad energy in my house, because I had to get rid of some bad energy from my house back when I was a young guy, man, early to mid 20s, and some I don't really want to go through again. And I don't want to really get into that. I've told that story before. There were several people. What I like to do, if you want, Josh, I'd like to change gears just a little bit here, because you came out with your book, the Werewolf and Dogman Phenomena, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've compiled this throughout all your years of talking to people and your own personal experiences. And in the book, no, I haven't got the book yet. I'm going to have to buy it. And hopefully you got the ones I sent you, because I was worried about that.
Not yet. I have not.
Well, I'm going to have to check. So everybody goes back and forth about Werewolf and Dogman and the differences. So in this book, I'd imagine that you outline the differences, or is there even a difference? And what does this even what role does it play in even the discussion tonight?
Well, so let me start with the last question first. What it has to do with this question is, people ask me this all the time. Paranormal Roundtable. I was at a food truck night before last, and I gave the guy a card. Really good place called Loomies. Check it out. They sell crepes and waffles. They're really nice guys that run it. And I was getting a waffle. I'm not joking. I couldn't eat this. It's too heavy, but my wife loves it. It's like a candy bar, the way they make it. It's so good, but it's not real sweet. It's really amazing. So I was talking to these guys. I gave them my card, and instantly there was a girl standing there, and she looked at it, and she's like, "Can I have one?" I gave it to her. She says, "So what do you do? It's paranormal. So you go around and you ghost hunt." They always just assume something like that. And I told her, I said, "No, ma'am, I don't go ghost hunting. I don't do that. It's not that TV type of show where she's like, what do you do?" I said, "We talk about everything. We talk about Bigfoot. We talk about Dogman. We talk about ghosts. We interview people who've had experiences. We talk about alien abduction, UFOs. We talk about the nature of reality, alternate realities, everything you could possibly imagine. We talk about it." And she's like, "Oh, that sounds very interesting." That was 2 days ago. And this morning, that person messaged me. And she's like, my dorm, she lives at dorms, college people. She's like, "My dorm mates checked your show out and they like it." And I said, "Have you?" She's like, "I have not. I have not had time." She said, "But I will. But I wanted you to know you have some new listeners." And I did. There was a few people who had, she had subscribed, told me, and they messaged me and said, "We like your show." And it's unique. It's different than what they were expecting, though, because the name paranormal has become, I think, hijacked by the ghost community, and it is just that's what that is. And it's also been thrown out there by flesh and blood crypto people that paranormal means ghosts. That has nothing to do with what we're doing. It has everything to do with what you're doing. Because do you think that a Bigfoot, whether it's flesh and blood or a spirit, I mean, do you think that's normal? I mean, you walk out into the woods, you go hiking with your dog and your friends or whatever, and then you run into an 8-foot tall hairy creature. Oh, that's normal. That's the Jack Link's guy. We're messing with scats, That's what's supposed to happen. That's normal. No, it's not normal. That's what the word means, paranormal. It's not normal. It goes beyond the realm of normality. So therefore, that's paranormal. I argued with a guy who's into the study of marine creatures. And we used to argue. His name was Scott Martis. He was a good friend of mine. He passed away. And I used to tell him, Scott, paranormal but before he passed away, though, he started to come around. He was like, you know what? I want to do a show on ghosts, possibly the ghosts of plesiosaurs. That was one of the things we were working on before he passed. I said, Scott, what's going on here? He's like, well, I think you're right. I think paranormal is just anything that's beyond the realm of normality. He came around. Unfortunately, he passed away, but there were a lot of people who've done that. They start off very flesh and blood. I always thought what I'd seen when I was 15 was flesh and blood. It's not. There was something more to it. It was physical, but it was metaphysical. And when you get down to brass tacks, so are we. With the way that we can come out of our body. Who's to say Sasquatch can't do the same thing, but on a better, like it's more pure. They can do it on a more, like more fluid level. I think that it has everything to do with what we're talking about. I think that these beings, they exist like in a fourth dimensional plane. And I think that it all kind of bleeds together at times, especially in certain times of the fall and spring equinox, the summer and winter solstice. And ancient man, they figured out these times when the veil was thin. And those were the times when you were more likely to see one of these creatures. A goblin or a puka or whatever, a jinn, whatever you have it, fairy. And I think over time, people began to learn this is a real thing. But modern world, in particular technology, has zapped that. But I think that a lot of what these things do, though, they hide in technology. I think that what happened too, if you go back to the Seal of Solomon, the Key of Solomon, the Song of Solomon, these different, it was a story of a ring that was given to him. And that ring, what its job was to control these beings, demons, if you're a Christian, jinn, if you're a Muslim. Mm-hmm. And they built the temple in Jerusalem. So the temple was broken when Christ's crucifixion. But Solomon used them to build the temple, kind of like slave labor. It started with a vampiric demon named Orneus. And when you read these stories, you're like, what is this? This is really bizarre. But this is canon in a lot of different religions. People believe this, like the Ethiopians. They take it as the gospel. It's real. And a lot of people say, well, there's different versions of the story. Of course there is. It's ancient. It's an ancient story. But I think that if you look at these sigils of these beings, they're found in computer parts. I kid you not. Go look at your computer. They match up. And I think that these things use electromagnetic energy, and the best thing that ever happened to them were fiber optic cables. And I think that the best thing that ever happened to them was being able to travel through our power lines and enter into your home, because they aren't supposed to be showing themselves to you. They're hidden for a reason. But they circumvent that through technology. You can look at a computer and communicate with them. Mm-hmm. You can use a spirit box and communicate with them. There's all kinds of ways that you can do it, but it kind of cheats what you're not supposed to be communicating with us. They're not supposed to be connecting with us. And when you seek them out, well, you're giving permission, for them to do whatever it is they're going to do, which is going to be to harass you and ultimately the desolation of your soul and your household. That's what's going to happen. I believe the Ouija boards are wrong. I don't think you should play with them. I think they're evil. And I think that they are a gateway. If you're out deep sea fishing, I don't know how many people's done. I've done it a couple times in my life. Never caught anything amazing. Caught a dogfish, I think, one time. But you go out there, yeah, you go
Of
out
all
there
the fish to catch, a dogfish.
a dogfish, yeah, a little shark, and you cast your line, and they're like, "We're looking for marlin." Well, you're just as likely to catch a hammerhead shark as you can't see what's in that water. You don't know what's biting. That's what you're doing when you play with a Ouija board. It's just an analogy for that. It's you don't know what's going to come through that portal. And in my book, there's a story of some girls, teenage girls, and they're playing with a Ouija board. And one of them asks, and this was connected to the Hernandez Ranch. It was Joe Hernandez, his stepdaughter, Angelica. She asked the question. She's like, "What?" She asked the board. She said, "What did my uncle see when he was working on the house? What did it look like?" And this thing tries to come out of a closet, start out like a whirlwind in this double-doored closet. And it starts trying to bring itself across. It's showing her, this is what I am. And terrified these girls. One of them went unconscious. And then later on, she had multiple experiences, whereas the others didn't. Something attached itself to her while she was unconscious. Because when you leave your body, folks, that's another thing. You have to be grounded, because if you do, something can attach itself to you very easily. Some people believe that they can jump in and get, not necessarily. They have to have a permission. And you can do it by accident too. And then they think, oh, I can move in now because I've been given permission. And one of the problems with people nowadays is that they're so busy on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and whatever, and they think that everything is a big game, and that there's the rules of the old days don't apply. Oh, they're still in place. They've just found new and inventive ways to circumvent them. It used to be through grimoires. But let me tell you something. There is a book that is a forbidden book, and I'll probably even say, I'm not going to say the name of it, but I've talked about it on my show. And even owning a digital copy of it is a problem. According to scholars from the Middle East who have studied this book, it's guarded by elves. It's very odd. These are Arabs and these are Muslims, and they don't call it jinn. They call it elves. But if you read in the hadith of the Quran, it says that the jinn have neighbors. Neighbors. And they're not referring to us as those neighbors. Very weird. It's like, what are they talking about? Who are these neighbors in the Kaf? The Green Mountains where they're from. Who are their neighbors? Why do they have neighbors? What is that? It's very odd. Well, we know there's a fourth dimension, which exists a right angle from us. We demonstrated it on the show and how you perforate it with a pen, you move it around. That's how they exist. It's geometry. But there's a fifth dimension and a sixth and a seventh. Michio Kaku, he's a scientist, Japanese.
I can't fathom that fifth, sixth dimension,
We can barely fathom the fourth dimension. I tell people like this, Rob, if you take a piece of paper and you draw, I'll show you a little. I'm not a really good artist, so I've broken every finger in my hands, but I'll draw a little cartoon and we'll call him Rob. We'll name
Very
him
good.
Rob. This is Rob right here. And Rob is a two-dimensional being. And we'll put a little bandana on him. I don't know if it looks
Well,
like
I do have a cartoon caricature of me, as everyone knows anyway, so I guess it's fitting.
Really? There we go.
Well,
There's Rob right there, right? That's about as good as you're going to get from me, folks.
Looks,
I think I made him look kind of angry. I don't know if he's not angry. I should have made him.
I'm not at all angry. I'm very happy.
Let me put the bottom there. There we go. He just kind of looks surprised. That's Rob right there, right? But Rob is two-dimensional. And Rob, we're going to draw a tree, a little happy tree, folks, a little happy tree.
Pacho says I look like little Michigan Rob now. Yeah.
little. That's little Rob. And here's
Yeah.
the tree here. Oh, that tree looks kind of like an alien next to you. But so there's a tree right there next to Rob, but it kind of looks like an alien. I'm not a good artist. So what Rob sees is this. All Rob sees is this line right here. He sees it curving. That's it. And then it goes down, and then he sees a point right there, and he sees another weird line right there at a point, and then he sees a line going down. You know why Rob can only see that? Because Rob is two-dimensional. Rob is a two-dimensional character, and he can only see this part, this edges, because he's living in a two-dimensional world. We are in the third dimension. So when we look at Rob and this weird-looking kind of spooky tree, I need to fix that there. Poor Rob's over here with his weird alien-looking thing.
Yeah.
So when we look at Rob and we look at this two-dimensional tree, we see everything. Rob can't see beyond these lines right here. That's it. He doesn't even know what's over here.
Right.
He's just like, I see this weird line right here. But us in the third dimension, we can see everything. Now, if we were to take a rock and draw it on the ground, there's the rock right there, right? You see it? Rob sees that. He can pick that up because he sees the line there, and he can, whatever. He puts it in his pocket. Nobody in the two-dimensional world knows what he did because he hid it. It's in his pocket. We can see everything Rob did because we're in the three-dimensional world. You see how that works? That's how it works in the fourth dimension. It's a higher dimension, and you cannot hide anything from them. They can see everything you do. That's the fourth dimension. That's how it works. Somebody said, is that Anthony? I think Anthony just said that. Anthony said, I wonder if the fourth dimension is being able to perceive things from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Yes, it is. And you have another sense that's active too. And the misconception of time, because we believe in time and we put a stricture on it that it's linear. When time is happening, it's all happening at the same time. And even saying at the same time is even a weird misnomer. It's hard to fathom, but we know that there is a fourth dimension, and that is where these beings come from, this next level up. If we're kindergarten, they're in like first or second grade. Okay. They're not even that high up on the food chain. But Spill and T says, finally, I understand it. Thank you. So when they come into our world, you can see them coming into our world like this ball, this sphere of light that we see in a lot of these beings. They travel on these balls of light, or in them, I should say. They unfurl and they flop out of them. There was a case I covered in Louisiana. This woman had inherited a plantation home. She didn't stay there a whole long time because as she got older, it just fell into disrepair and she got rid of it. The property was nice, and it was like there was a creek right there, and it was a beautiful place. But these dogman type creatures came out of these balls of light. I believe they were like orange or something, and they dropped out of them. And she asked me the question. She's like, have you ever heard of anything like that? And I thought, I'm sure I have. Of course I have. These things come out of these spheres. She says, I could see them coming into our world, like coming in, just out of thin air and just kind of pulsating. And she's like, where do they come from? And I said, probably the fourth dimension. They travel on these balls of light. And you ever heard of the saying, the speed of light. Right. They can move as fast as electricity can move, which is the speed of light. You have to wonder, like, what that is, where that is, or that they're coming from. How is it that sometimes we can see them and sometimes we can't? Because I've heard of people knowing that something's there, but they can't see it. They can hear it breathing. They can even hear it talking, but they can't see it because they remain hidden. But everything you do, they can see it. And some of them can even read your mind because you're putting out thoughts into the ether, and your thoughts can take form too.
Right.
You got to be very careful what you think, because your thoughts can take on an energy and become a tulpa. And that's another
Yeah, I
thing,
was about
you
to say
know.
the tulpa and manifestation.
Mhm.
I believe we can all do that. Well,
There's a Sufi mystic that I was reading. He was saying that when you create a tulpa, it's more powerful than these beings who've been here for a long time. It's more powerful than the jinn. They're more powerful than anything, because we are given free will by God. And this was supposedly this Sufi mystic. He was told this by the jinn, like he could communicate with them, and they told him, they were like, "Those are more dangerous than anything, because as humans, you are given free will by God." He's like, "We no longer have free will. We're bound by certain strictures. Humans are allowed to do whatever. Now, there's a consequence. You're going to pay for that. It's like a credit card. You'll max it out. You will pay the interest. Believe me, it's going to happen. But in the meantime, you could think things and create things and conjure things up, and they could create their own, you know. And it's a very dangerous thing to have one of these tulpas running around. When David Wedley was on my show, we talked about the experiments. This woman was in not Bangladesh. She was in Tibet, and she was in Nepal. That's right. She was in Nepal, Kathmandu, I believe it was, and she literally conjured up a monk, like a little fat bald like monk, you know, Franciscan monk, and he ran around creating all kinds of mischief and havoc, and that's a very famous story. These thought forms can take on a reality, they make their own reality and become, you know, because we have the power, we have that life, breath, and spark of God in us. We have the power to create. Now, I believe that we were a creation of a creation. It's not a popular belief, but I believe the Anunnaki created us, but I believe God created them. And I don't think they were supposed to create us, but God felt mercy on us, and that's why he sent Christ and didn't want us to have to suffer through this last age. It's very weird. You can go into all these different realities and all these different theories. There's a pond theory that we're like bubbles, the worlds are bouncing off of one another. And when I was a child, I'm going to tell you, this is a story. When I was a child, I had a microscope, a very powerful microscope. Now, you could get, when I was a kid, and Rob, you know this, when we were kids, you had to order things. You sent off something from the back of a comic book, and you hoped for the best.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Everybody had the sea monkeys. Mine were their little package of dried crap, and it was just dead brine shrimp. That's all it was.
Yes.
Very disappointing. You got burned. You had the silly putty that came in. It was like magic putty.
Yeah,
There's all these things.
know.
We
And
all had
before I could, I don't want to interrupt you, but before I forget, I remember my dad got me an ant farm and all these dead ants. Right, they're
They
dead.
always showed up dead. That's what happened to me
He
too.
showed up dead, man.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this, and my dad's like, "Don't worry." I'm like, "Whatever." And it was all the sand. There was no trails. There's no tunnels. And I'm looking at, you know, like dead ants that were stacked in a pyramid like Egypt, right?
Oh my gosh.
But you know, I swear, I got that Christmas, and I got to tell you something. I was so surprised. Maybe about 4 to 6 weeks later, you know, they all of a sudden I woke up and they they came to life, right? And they started making the tunnels. Whatever those scientists did to freeze them like that and keep their body, you know, like hypothermia, I guess. I have no clue, but that's true story. That's true story. They came back to life. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, that just
that's correct. You remember the Super Ball? You bounce it one time, and you get on your bike and go look for it, and it's always in the weeds where the snakes are, and your dog comes chewing on it later on and chokes on it, or maybe that was just me, I don't know. But I had a billion of those. I'd put the 25 cents in there, or you get the really big one for 20, you know, and you bounce it one time in your driveway, and then you have to go look for it for an hour. It was never, I don't know what the point was. I could make them bounce up and down off of the ceiling until my mom, she'd come in there with a belt. But my grandfather, he was not into books. He was not into all that learning, you know, but he did have a janitorial business at one time, and he cleaned UT. He had certain wings. The science wing was one of his spots. and he had people that worked for him, and he was retired. And he was a retired truck driver, and he had money to start a business. So for whatever reason, he decided, you know what, I'm going to start a janitorial business. He was able to talk to people and make friends with everybody.
Yeah.
And he bought me a telescope from a professor at UT when I was like 7 years old. And I will never forget this. It was Christmas present. He came, they drove 6 hours to Northwest Texas from here in Central Texas. And he told me, he's like, I got you the best Christmas present you're ever going to get, you know. And he knew how much I loved science. It was my thing. When I was a kid, science was everything. And everybody wanted to be, you know, an astronaut. And I did. I love space. I had a little model of the space shuttle, you know. And I open it, and I'm like, it's a microscope. I had been asking for one since the year before, because I had played with one, and at my cousin's house, and it was a little cheapy, whatever. And this was a microscope. He paid $100 to this professor for a microscope that they got new ones every year at UT. So this professor had a few of them, and he's like, I'll sell you one for $100. He's like, they go for $500. Now you can imagine in the early 80s, early 80s, I think this was like 82 or something, a microscope for $100. That was expensive. And if they're $500, these are like top of the line. The things I did with that microscope, I caught a fly, and I watched it. I put it in a pimento, like, you know, where you get the pimento cheese, but they're like pimentos, a little flat jar. I caught one in there, and I flipped it over, and I observed it. And I actually put little bitty holes in there, and I dropped tiny pieces of bread. I stuffed it in there, and I observed this fly. I magnified it, and I saw it throwing up on the bread. I saw what it did. And I was in shock. Nobody had ever told me that's how they ate. And so then ever since then, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't like flies. They land on you, they vomit. And they do, they really do. And I saw, I caught like a spider, and I stuck it in a jar, and I flattened it out. I didn't kill it. I did eventually on accident, but I was trying to observe it. And, I saw so many crazy things. I saw mites crawling around on bugs. I saw amoebas and things inside of water. And I remember taking a dirty drop of dishwater that my mom had at my teacher. One of my teachers, she said, I'm going to take you to the science wing to talk to the biology teacher at the middle school, because I went to at that time when I was little, elementary school in a small town. So the middle school was right next door. So at recess, the teacher took me out of the playground, and she took me to the teacher. I can't remember her name. And she takes me, I'm not the teacher, my teacher. I remember her name, but I don't remember this woman. And I met her, and she said, so you're interested in science? I said, yes. So she started explaining to me about chemicals and all these different things, and having a microscope and what you could do with it, and was showing me it was amazing. Gave me all kinds of slides. I even pricked my finger and looked at my blood.
You know, I'm just thinking back too. Again, I was talking about the farm, the ant farm, and my dad also got me a microscope. And when I was a little boy, I was fascinated with bugs, ants. I would take ants, throw them in spider webs. I'd make ants fight each other, all these crazy things as a boy. And then you remember those bugs that they curl up when you pick them up? They're like gray, and they
roly-polies.
Roly-polies, you call them, yeah. So I played with those. And I looked down the bottom of this one roly-poly, and on the bottom, his stomach it looked like he was, I guess, pregnant. I was thinking as a kid. And I got the new microscope. Now, I didn't want to kill this thing, because I'm like, I didn't kill bugs. I just didn't step on them or anything. But I remember having the microscope. So I had this ingenious idea. Well, I don't want to kill this, but I want to put this under the microscope and see what's inside that bump. So I got some Scotch tape, and I kind of taped them on the slide. It was very, I went through about 5 roly-polies before I finally got one on correctly. And he put it under the microscope. And this is where I first really got involved with science, man. The microscope, I could see the little babies inside the roly-poly moving around. I couldn't see they were babies, but I knew that it was something that was probably the offspring or an embryo that was forming. That, dude, was so cool. And then I, just said, yeah, Mom and Dad, I'm going to be a scientist, and stuff like that. And I ended up becoming a bar owner, but it is what it is,
And now we're podcasters. I mean, yeah,
podcast. Yeah, talking about all this weird stuff. But yeah,
science is cool. I mean, and I ended up with a chemistry set, same situation the next year. My grandfather, and I ended up with nitric acid in these test tubes, which, at that point, I'm 8 years old at that point. And I learned by dropping some of it onto a board game we had. It was like a life board or something, or Monopoly or something. And it ate holes in it. And then I made like different types of acid solutions, and I took a cup, those Sonic cups, like the styrofoam, and I stuck it in there, and it completely dissolved it. Like it was just gone. And I was like, wow. And an 8-year-old shouldn't have something. Of course, I didn't tell my parents what I was doing. And I ended up blowing up my yard, killing a bunch of ants. And my dad was like, what the heck? I think I was like 9 or 10 when I did that. I was trying to get rid of the problem because they had stung my dog almost to death, because she had laid down and a bunch of fire ants almost killed her. So I was mad. So I went out there and I decided to get rid of them. And I did, but I knocked huge holes in the ground. And that's another story. But the microscope was very interesting. And when we were talking about worlds within worlds, I took dirty dish soap from a syringe, not with a needle on it, but, and I went and I put it into a Petri dish, and I saw an entire world grow.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, at that young age, I was about 7 or 8, that summer I turned 8. And I remember thinking, that is us. What if that is what we are? That was the first time I ever thought. I became cognizant of the idea that what if we are just specks of little germs, and this ball of earth that we're living on, or flat earth, whatever you believe. I don't know. Some people say it's round. Some people say it's not. Whatever it is, chewed up bubble gum. Yeah. Whatever we're living on, I thought, what if that is it? What if we're living on this giant breadcrumb that just fell off of somebody's plate, and we're just all these bacteria living on it, and everything, and then the sun is just some light bulb. And people say, well, it's as simple as them just turning the light off, and it could be, and then everything goes dark for us. But we can judge that light bulb and how much life it has, But at any time, the light switch could be turned off. But that could take millions of years for that person to walk from one side of the room to the other, because time is way different for a larger being than it is for a smaller being. What I mean by that is, if you took an ant and you set him in South Austin, and his mission was to walk from South Austin all the way to North Austin, 15 miles, whatever it is, how much more quickly is it going to be for you to walk with your big legs? You're going to get there in half a day, whatever. He's going to be there for weeks trying to move his little legs, and depending on how tired he gets and how many times he has to stop. But time is totally different. And then, of course, if you take an ant mound that's right next to a busy highway or a thoroughfare or whatever, they can't comprehend that there's a road there. They can't comprehend that there's vehicles on the road or people driving the vehicles. They have no clue. We're like that. We're in this great cosmos, and we can't comprehend anything outside of it. And then you have people who are stuck on religion, incorrect religion too, and saying, well, I don't believe in any of this stuff because it's not in this book. And, the ants are probably doing the same thing. I don't believe in that. I hear these rumblings, but I don't believe in it, And then one day somebody's walking along and just steps on it and just completely crushes their world. That's the apocalypse to them.
Yeah.
Apocalypse could be the same way for us. Some higher authority and we just go flying, and that's it.
Yeah. And I tell you, I used to have dreams about maybe perhaps the apocalypse as a little kid. And what I mean by that is I would have these weird thoughts. I would see these little ants on the ground. I played with bugs, and I could see them, the smallest ant, dragging these sticks and things that they have no business being able to handle. And I was thinking to myself, man, the strength of that, pulling that. Then I got onto thinking, what if there were giant ants? Then, of course, the movies came out about the giant spiders and ants, and all of a sudden it all followed suit. And I'm like, here we go. But yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. And when you look at these worlds within worlds, like, and what we could be and what we aren't, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're the giant, sometimes you're the nanoparticle. You know, I see
Yeah.
people talking about nanoparticles. You know, it's hard to fathom what we are. I know that there's a creation behind it. I know that there's a mind that God sent, you know, his own Holy Spirit and his Son to pull us out of what's coming, which is the
Mhm.
Kali Yuga, the age of destruction.
Yep.
And people say, well, I don't believe in reincarnation because it doesn't fit into whatever. But you know what? It was in books that were taken out. I believe literally when Jesus says you must be born again, he's being serious.
Yeah.
You know, and not just in the spirit. But if you, and according to the Hindu belief too, like the Vedas, they tell you that if you cry out to Krishna, you know, so it sounds very close to Christ, but the people argue all day long that they're not the same because they don't do the same thing in their respective religions, but it's the same name, very close to it. The names say a lot. But if you cry out to him, you can transcend and you can avoid all of that. Well, that's the same thing in our world, in our belief, in Christianity.
Yeah.
If you cry out to Christ, you don't have to suffer all this, you know, whatever. You'll have to pay the price, and the wages of sin is death, ultimately. But you're not going to face the second death because he says you will have everlasting life.
Yep.
John 3:16.
For sure.
Yeah.
You know, Josh, in about 10, 12 minutes, we'll be coming up on 2.5 hours, and I do appreciate it. And I was wondering if you just want to go 2.5, and maybe if you got a cool cryptid story to send this show home, and I think people would like a little tale, and then we can call it a night, man.
Sure. Which
It's you can,
cryptid would you like to hear about? Because I have a billion of them.
yeah. Well, you know what the big three are, right? I tell you what, let's go with a Bigfoot. Everyone does Dogman and
Well, there's
Werewolf.
a
Yeah,
lot of Bigfoot stories.
you know.
Geez, I got one that I was going to tell on my show tomorrow night, and I'll probably retell it there because not everybody's in here tonight.
Right.
But this one was interesting, and I thought it was. There's a couple of them that are very similar that I got, and me and Anthony were going over these. And there was a woman who gave me, and she's actually Vietnamese by birth. She doesn't speak it, and she wondered if that was part of why she was having these experiences because her mother had practiced shamanism, and I know about that. It's something that Tony's mother had done, you know, and then she stopped because there were some things that happened, and she figured out, hey, this isn't what I should be doing, and she was having scenarios where something was coming into her room and was holding her down, or it was sitting on her chest. And at one point during one of these like dreamlike states she was going into, in one of these realities, like you said, she wakes up and this is on her and she can't breathe and she feels like something's around her throat. But she looks to the left of her bed and out her window. And this was up in Seattle. This was in the city too. This wasn't out in the middle of nowhere. This was an apartment. And she sees standing there what looks completely like a Bigfoot type creature. Now her apartment abutted up against some trees, some woods. And one of her neighbors about 2 weeks before had claimed to have seen a Sasquatch type creature with reddish brown hair that was digging in the trash. And it even had what it looked like a juvenile with it. Now, this is a weird story because I thought, I don't know, when she told me this story, I thought this is, you know, unusual. And I have another one that's very similar. I was going to tell both of them tomorrow. I'll tell the other one tomorrow on the show. But she looks over and she sees this Bigfoot type creature and he's looking, her window, her blinds are open and the window is open partway. And he's looking in the window. While she's struggling with this thing, she's like, I was born and raised Buddhist, no religion. She's like secular, just 100% secular. As soon as she turned like 18, moved out, she kind of rejected the whole Buddhist thing, whatever. She says, at that point, I began to pray. Never prayed before in my life. And she's like, and I asked Christ, she was like, if you're real, help me. Get this thing off of me. And she looks over and she sees this creature. And he's looking in the window. And this is what she said. She said that when she began to pray, that this squatch that was standing there in the window told her, good job, mentally, and walked off. And then whatever it was got off of her, and then her window rattled and closed.
Mm.
And so she asked me, she's like, what do you think this was? And I mean, I was just very point blank. I said, you took a bunch of acid and that's why that happened to you. I'm joking. I didn't. That's not what I said. I'm kidding. No. And I told her, I said, you know what? I don't know if the Bigfoot was a part of what was going on. I don't know if it was flesh and blood. I don't, she never saw it again. Nobody else had reported seeing anything like this other than the one neighbor she had said a couple weeks before. And I said, do you even know that that was really a Bigfoot, or maybe you were thinking it because you were in that in-between dream state that you were waking up to this entity on you and you remembered somebody talking about it? That could be too.
Yeah.
But she never saw it again, but she did dream of it again. She had a dream and she was like, she goes, I smoke cigarettes. And I told her, I was like, whoa, you're going to hell. But no, she walked outside. She said, I was smoking a cigarette. She's like, and I just remembered, I was like, whoa, I had this dream. She's like, you know how you don't always remember when you wake up, Rob? We talked about that.
Yep, for sure.
And she walks outside and she's like, I had this dream of this being that I had seen through my window. And that being, when it came to her and it offered her, I mean, something, but it was like little crushed up flowers with like grass. And in the dream, she took it from this Bigfoot type creature and it just shook its head and walked off. And I was like, what do you think that means to you? She goes, I have no idea. It was offering me something. And I told her, I said, in my honest opinion, I don't think these creatures are good. I don't think they're all bad, but I think it's very much like the jinn. The people believe that the jinn, a lot of people believe that they have free will too. Not as much as we do because they have, they messed up. But they do have different religions. Like they have schools. They're just like another reality that just lives on top of and next to our reality. I said, and these Bigfoot could be very similar. This Bigfoot could have been out of its physical body and it could have been making friends with you. I don't know if that's true. I don't get many stories where they're really friendly. But it was a peaceful story. She said, I never interacted with it again. That was 7 years ago. She just told me the story recently. It happened in 2020. So that would have been 2013. She said it was during COVID and it was like very, very rough. This thing kept coming and jumping on it. She had just moved into that apartment. And for the duration of that time that she lived there, she felt the presence there, but it never crawled on top of her again. And she ended up going to church with her friend who was Catholic. And she's now Catholic. And she asked me what I thought about Catholicism. I told her my mother was born a Catholic and I was baptized a Catholic, but we converted to Baptist. And then we went to non-denominational. I've been baptized 3 times. So I told her, I said, don't ask me. I have too many different takes on Christianity. And I don't think any of them are correct.
Mm-hmm.
But that was, that was a weird story, but she said nothing happened to her ever again.
Wow.
But a Bigfoot showing up during what could be a demonic episode, I don't know. Is there a connection? If you ask one person, they're going to tell you the Bigfoot was a part of it. It was causing it. It was a demon.
Yeah.
And then if you ask the next guy or gal, they're going to tell you, well, the Bigfoot was just trying to help you. He was checking on you. And then the next person is going to say it's a coincidence. It was just a physical creature that saw you in trouble and was watching you. So there you go.
Yeah, there you go. And I have to tell you too, and people, I'll take flack for this from some people, not all, but most people know my opinion. You'll never catch good old BMR saying that Bigfoot is the friendly forest giant. Okay.
No.
And you'll never hear me say that Bigfoot is flesh and blood either. Those are my 2 stances, because what I saw, it was neither human. Maybe it was inhumanoid, Bart Nunnally would say.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot into it for what I saw. Very creepy. It was very disturbing. This has been a great show, Josh. Thank you so much for coming on. I enjoyed it. We were our topic was a little different, right? For a cryptid show, but I enjoyed every minute of it and learned quite a bit. And hopefully everybody out there did too. I want to thank all the newer subscribers. Now listen, just because you're a new subscriber and Josh was here doesn't mean, okay, that's it, don't come back. Because, that's not cool. Hey, listen, I'm on Tuesday nights at 9, Thursday afternoons at 1. I talk Bigfoot. I talk Dogman. Saturdays, I do cryptid encounter stories. We have guests. We have experiencers, researchers. Okay. So we have a quality show. And Josh certainly wouldn't come on if he didn't think it was a quality show. So I do appreciate that. And I want to thank everybody who left the super chat, the donations for memberships, joining memberships. I can't read it all off. It'd take another 20 minutes, but I personally am very grateful and humbled by the donations. So thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I tried to wear the green. I see that it's.
Yeah, there we go. I appreciated that. I was going to wear, but it was too hot. It's not quite hot here in Michigan because I got your paranormal hoodie that you gave me so graciously a couple years ago, but couldn't. It was just too hot to wear today. You got to wait till January or February.
Yeah, well, I can send you some swag. I can send you some shirts. Just give me your size, and I'll ship it out next to my mail off, which is Tuesday. So
yeah, and we'll talk. Thanks for that. So everybody, of course, subscribe to PRT, my channel, Bigfoot Mystery Rob, Texas Front Porch, the Blondes and Booze Paranormal Podcast. Bart Nulley is now out Wednesday. He does a live show. He's really doing well. He hit 5,000 subscribers, so shout out to him. And I love the group of people I'm associated with because I think that we're truthers, man, and we don't give you no BS. And that's what I appreciate most about you and your group that you hang with and all you paratroopers out there. So with that being said, I do appreciate it. Just hang out for a couple minutes and I'll let you go. I know you got to get up in the morning for work, but thank you.
I got to go to work tonight. That's not in the morning.
Well, yeah, tonight. Okay. Thanks, everybody. All right, buddy. Thanks, everybody. Until next time, BMR for Josh Turner. We're out.